I need your help, Jessica. Come on, come here. What's your favorite VeggieTales song, Jessica?
The bunny, ooh, I love the bunny. I don't love the soup or the bread.
Thank you, Jessica.
Oh.
That was great. All right. You might have seen it in the VeggieTales version, and if you haven't, then you're totally missing out, where our heroes were condemned for not bowing down to a giant chocolate bunny. That's right, it's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Of course, in the real story, it's not a giant chocolate bunny that gets them in trouble, as you will soon find out. The story of the fiery furnace is just a small part in the book of Daniel, but there's still a lot that we can learn from these 3 Jews and a king whose names I still can't consistently spell correctly. No matter the version, be it chocolate bunny or giant gold statue, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego teach us the power of friendship, faith, God's will, and God's reliability. So let's get some background info to get our setting in order. This story takes place during a time when the kingdom of Babylon was in control of Judah, and many Jews were being held captive in the city of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar, we'll call him Neby, was reigning, and he was super into preserving the culture of his people and arts and stuff. In fact, he was most known for creating the Hanging Gardens of Babylon for his wife, one of the wonders of the ancient world. Since Judah was captive to the Babylonians, the Jews were widely persecuted and hated. So I guess, as an attempt to civilize the Jews, or preserve culture or something, King Neby decided to kidnap some young Jewish nobles and teach them the language and culture of Babylon, and have them eat from the king's table. Some of those brought in were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were all given new Chaldean names, which is what we know the latter 3 as today. Daniel became Belteshazzar. We'll go with that. That's pretty hard to say. I guess that's why he's always referred to as Daniel. Anyway, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. They were chosen for being good-looking and intelligent, and were to be trained for 3 years. So these guys were the cream of the crop. Basically, the majority of the book of Daniel consists of Daniel and/or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego directly disobeying the orders of a king, thwarting imminent demise, and then immediately getting promoted. This starts at the beginning of their training when Daniel and the Fearsome Threesome refused to eat meat and delicacies. The leader of the eunuchs was concerned that their health would noticeably be poorer than the other trainees, and he'd get in trouble. But Daniel insisted, and they were given 10 days to prove that they could survive on vegetables. And sure enough, at the end of the 10 days, the 4 of them looked better and were stronger than all the rest, and they gained favor with King Neby. And Daniel even convinced the king to, guess what, promote the other 3, and they went off on their own. Basically what I'm saying is that these guys were extremely godly and faithful people, and the importance of their faith is proven throughout the book. So moving along. Because King Neby was pretentious like that, he had a 9-story gold statue of himself built, not a bunny, and declared that whenever the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, and every other kind of music, they had to bow down and worship it. Of course, the Fearsome Threesome were faithful to their god and didn't bow down when they heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, and every other kind of music. Okay. As previously mentioned, Jews were being persecuted at the time, and others were probably jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's high standing, so they were happily tattled on to the king. Nebuchadnezzar was properly enraged, but he kind of liked the 3 and was reluctant to murder them, so he gave them a second chance to fall down and worship when they hear the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, and every other kind of instrument. But even in the face of the king, they refused, saying that their God would deliver them from the fiery furnace. At that point, the king had no choice but to throw them in, and he was so mad that he had the furnace turned up 7 times hotter than usual. So hot, in fact, that it killed the guards who bound and escorted our heroes. But not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Disappointed with the lack of satisfying screams, Nebuchadnezzar had a guard check in the furnace who reported that he saw 4, that's right, 4, unbound figures in the fire. It's pretty great because it's really nonchalant about them being in the fiery furnace. Like they were just chilling in there playing cards with an angel, no big deal. And as you may have guessed, the 4th figure was the Spirit of the Lord protecting them. It can also be interpreted as an angel or as Jesus himself. So the king called to them, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire totally unscathed. All of the officials gathered and were amazed, and King Neby realized that God sent an angel to protect them. King Nebuchadnezzar actually summarizes the whole thing pretty well. They trusted in him who defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. He also commanded that no one in the land say anything bad about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And of course, the final line of the chapter states, "Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon." Daniel is definitely the star of this book. It's named after him, for one thing. But there are still a lot of themes we can look into and lessons we can learn from this one little chapter recounting Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's amazing experience. What I got out of it is their outstanding display of friendship and faith. First of all, we can see from the two examples that the three always choose God's way, the quote-unquote narrow path, despite facing horrible consequences. Being burned alive isn't fun. They could have chickened out and saved their own skins, but they knew God to be faithful, and it ended up benefiting them and glorifying God. They got promoted, and King Nebuchadnezzar helped to spread God's name to the people. I think it's also important to note that the story is about all three of them in the fiery furnace, rather than a singular experience like Daniel in the lion's den. We know the three were friends, otherwise they wouldn't have gone through something like this together. They would have supported and encouraged one another to be faithful. It's extremely difficult to stand up against authority, I'm sure especially when you're facing death. Just think, if just one of them had given in and bowed down, almost surely all would have fallen. But because they held each other up, they were able to overcome adversity and show God to an unbelieving king. Together. And of course, the story once again proves God's power, that he is way more powerful than a king or even a deadly fiery furnace. So, from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's story, we learn that being a good friend and having friends that you can count on and being accountable to each other can help us in our faith. We also learn that being faithful and not selfish can glorify God's power and can cause amazing things to happen because God is always faithful no matter what. He won't leave you hanging. So some things to think about. Do you support your friends? Do you have friends that you can count on? And do you help each other stay faithful? If you have any questions or comments, please leave a comment in the comment section below and I will read all of them because when I get a comment, I literally jump for joy. It's true. Also, please discuss the story with your teachers, peers, friends, relatives, dogs, cats, whoever, and because one of the best ways to learn is through discussion. And tell me what you think we should talk about next. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.